Hey guys, tonight we are going to slip back in time, peel away the glorious marble and shining armor, and peer behind the spectacle to see what it really felt like to be one of Rome's most iconic, yet most disposable figures. A gladiator. Forget the movies for a minute, the ones where you're a muscle-bound hero with a perfect tan, leading slave revolts, or winning freedom with a single dramatic flourish. The reality? Well, you probably wouldn't survive long enough for a sequel, let alone a franchise. That's just a little reality check. Rome wasn't exactly big on happy endings for guys in your line of work. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're drifting off somewhere in the world right now, let me know where you are and what time it is in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself here? You're dusty, maybe a little sore from the journey, definitely uncertain about what happens next. Your clothes are simple, coarse wool, nothing remarkable. Around you, there are others who look just as lost, their faces a mix of fear, resignation, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of defiance quickly suppressed. How did you get here? Well, that's the thing about ending up in this particular predicament in ancient Rome. There were a few unfortunate paths that led to the same grim destination. Perhaps you were a prisoner of war, captured on some distant frontier, bundled onto a ship, or forced to march across miles you never knew existed. Your homeland, your family, everything you knew, is now just a fading memory clinging to the back of your mind. Or maybe you were born into slavery, a slave owned by someone who decided you had the physique or the sheer desperation that could be profitable in a very specific, very dangerous industry. Your master saw coins in your muscles, not a person. It's a harsh calculation, but Roman society, for all its aqueducts and philosophy, could be brutally practical. Another common path, and perhaps one of the most tragic, was condemnation. Maybe you committed a crime, something that landed you before a magistrate who decided your punishment wasn't just imprisonment or hard labor, but death. A death you had to earn through combat. Sometimes the crime wasn't even that severe, but the mood of the judge, or the politics of the moment, sealed your fate. And then there were the voluntary ones. Yes, surprisingly, some men, driven by debt, despair, or a misguided thirst for glory, or perhaps just 3 meals a day and a roof, sold themselves into this life. They signed a contract, binding them to a lanista, a gladiator manager, swearing away their freedom and their very life. It sounds utterly insane to us now, doesn't it? To willingly step into a world where your likely end is on the sand, bleeding out while thousands cheer or jeer. But Rome was a place of extremes, and for some, the outside world offered even fewer options. Or perhaps the potential payoff, however slim, seemed worth the monstrous risk. This is actually a point of contention among experts. Exactly how voluntary was this voluntary service? Were these men truly making a free choice, or were they pushed by circumstances so dire they had no other realistic options? It's a tough question to answer millennia later. No matter how you arrived, you're here now, standing outside the gates of a ludus. That's the term for a gladiator school. Don't picture a school with classrooms and textbooks, though. This is more like a barracks meets a prison meets a training camp. all wrapped up in thick stone walls designed to keep you in and the curious public out. You can hear sounds from inside, the clang of metal, the shouting of commands, perhaps the occasional pained cry. It's not exactly a welcoming soundscape. The air smells of sweat, dust, and something else, something metallic and vaguely animalistic that you can't quite place yet. It's the smell of this place. Your eyes adjust to the harsh Roman sun reflecting off the stone. You see other newcomers, looking just as bewildered as you feel. Some are burly men, perhaps soldiers who lost their last battle. Others are slender, maybe former slaves, or those condemned for lesser crimes. You see different ethnicities, different complexions, all united by this single unfortunate circumstance. Rome's appetite for entertainment knew no borders. Its gladiators came from all corners of the empire and beyond. This diversity, bringing together men from Britannia to Egypt, is a mainstream historical fact, demonstrating the vast reach of Rome and its peculiar form of popular entertainment. A burly figure approaches, barked orders slicing through the nervous silence. He's dressed in simple, practical clothes, carrying a heavy stick. He's a custos, a guard. He doesn't look friendly. His eyes scan the group, assessing, categorizing. You feel like a piece of livestock being evaluated at market. And in a very real sense, you are. Your potential value isn't in your labor or your craftsmanship. It's in your ability to perform violently and entertainingly. You're herded through a gate, into a courtyard. The walls rise high around you, blocking out the view of the city, of the world outside. This courtyard is covered in sand, the same kind you'll later fight on in the arena, designed to soak up blood. Training equipment is scattered around. Heavy wooden poles, dummy weapons, perhaps a few men sparring under the watchful eyes of trainers. It's not like they just handed you a sword on day one and said, "Good luck." While the popular image might be raw, untrained fighters thrown to the wolves, the reality is that gladiators were valuable investments. Training was crucial. And training started from the absolute basics. You weren't just taught how to swing a sword. You were taught specific stances, specific movements, how to parry, how to strike, how to use your shield effectively. Different weapon styles required entirely different training regimens. A retiarius, with his net and trident, moved completely differently from a heavily armored myrmidon. It was a complex, specialized skill set, honed through endless, monotonous, and often painful repetition. Imagine, if you can, standing in this dusty courtyard, the sun beating down, sweat trickling into your eyes. You're given a heavy wooden sword, much heavier than a real one, designed to build strength. You're told to strike a palace, a thick wooden post, driven into the ground. Again and again you swing, you thrust, you parry imaginary blows aimed at this unmoving target. Your muscles ache, your hands blister, your mind screams for a break, but the trainers, the doctors, are watching. And they have sticks. Disobedience, slacking, showing weakness. These are not options. This rigorous, specific training, tailored to different fighting styles, is another key aspect of gladiator life. It wasn't random brawling. It was a highly stylized, deadly martial art. The doctors themselves were often former gladiators, veterans who had survived long enough to retire or earn their freedom, now imparting their deadly knowledge to the next generation of fighters. They knew the tricks, the weaknesses of different styles, the importance of endurance and discipline. They were your teachers, your taskmasters, and sometimes the only ones who seemed to care whether you lived or died, because your life was their livelihood. You might wonder, how did this whole gladiator thing even start? It's a quirky tidbit, but the earliest gladiatorial combats weren't actually public entertainment in grand arenas. They started as funeral rites, a blood sacrifice to honor the deceased in wealthy families, a tradition borrowed from the Etruscans. Imagine that. Your first introduction to gladiatorial combat wasn't in the roaring Colosseum, but perhaps a somber private affair held near a tomb, a small ritualistic fight to accompany a soul to the afterlife. Over time, this evolved, growing in scale and spectacle, moving from private funerals to public games, becoming the massive industry you're now unfortunately a part of. From a religious offering to a multi-million sesterce industry, that's quite a trajectory, isn't it? As dusk begins to fall, casting long shadows across the sand, the training stops. Your body throbs with exertion. Your mind is a hazy mix of fear and exhaustion. You're not led to comfortable rooms. Your accommodation is basic, communal, and definitely not private. You'll get a meager meal, probably heavy on the grains, and then you'll rest, your sore muscles protesting, dreading the training that starts again at dawn. This is just the beginning. You've entered the ludus, and the door has closed firmly behind you. There's no easy way out. The gates of the ludus have closed, leaving the world outside as a distant rumor. Now you are inside the walls, and these walls are thick, designed to be escape-proof. Life within the ludus is a world unto itself, a microcosm of brutal discipline, rigid hierarchy, and constant underlying tension. Your accommodation is stark. Don't expect a private room with a view. You're likely sharing a small cell or cubicle with several other men. The walls are bare stone. The floor is packed earth or simple flagstones. Your bed is probably a straw mattress, or perhaps just a rough mat on the floor. There's little in the way of comfort or privacy. Everything is communal. Sleeping quarters, washing areas, which are rudimentary at best, and the mess hall, if you can call it that. Imagine the sounds around you at night. The snores of other men crammed into the same space. The occasional cough or groan from someone injured. The pacing of a guard outside your door. The wind whistling through gaps in the stone. It's the soundtrack of confinement. During the day, the sounds change, but don't necessarily improve. The constant shouting of trainers, the clang of weapons in the training yard, the grunts and cries of men pushing themselves to their limits. The ludus isn't just a place to train. It's a social structure, albeit a grim one. There's a definite pecking order here. At the bottom are the Tyrones, the novices. That's you right now. You know nothing, you're skilled in nothing, and you have zero experience in the arena. You're the most expendable. Above you are the more experienced fighters, those who have survived a few bouts, perhaps even won a few. And at the top are the veterani, the veterans. These are the survivors, the ones who have fought many times, honed their skills, and perhaps even gained a degree of fame outside these walls. They might have slightly better accommodations, perhaps a small individual cell or at least a bit more space. They get preferential treatment, better food, and they certainly command respect, or at least fear, from the Tyrones. You learn quickly to defer to the veterans. Their experience could mean the difference between life and death, both in the arena and sometimes even within the ludus itself. This established hierarchy based on experience and survival is a core structure of gladiator schools, a mainstream historical fact that governed daily life. The tension within these walls is palpable. Every man is a potential opponent. You train together, eat together, sleep near each other. But when the summons comes, you could find yourself standing across the sand from someone you shared a meal with just hours before. There's camaraderie, perhaps, born of shared hardship and desperation, but it's always underscored by this brutal reality. Trust is a luxury you can't afford. Anyone could be your next opponent, and their survival depends on your death. It fosters a strange mix of dependence and wariness among the fighters. You rely on each other in training, pushing each other, but you know that partnership dissolves the moment you enter the arena. Your diet, as we touched on briefly, is primarily grains. You are hordearii, the barley eaters. This nickname wasn't just random. The staple of your diet is barley, often boiled into a thick, unappetizing mash. Why barley? Well, it's cheap, it's filling, and it was believed to build bulk and strength. There's a quirky tidbit here. Some ancient sources suggest the gladiators drank a concoction made from burnt wood ash dissolved in water, which they believed helped strengthen their bones. Think of it as a rather primitive, ash-flavored calcium supplement. Modern analysis of gladiator skeletons found in burial sites does show higher levels of calcium compared to the general population, lending some credence to this practice. So, besides barley mush, you might be choking down ash water shakes. Not exactly a gourmet experience. This peculiar diet, designed for bulk and perhaps bone density, is another aspect of the unique life within the ludus. The daily routine is relentless and monotonous. You wake before dawn, eat your barley, and then training begins. It lasts for hours, broken only by brief rests, and perhaps another meager meal. The afternoons might involve more training, weapons maintenance, or perhaps just confined waiting. Evenings are for more barley and then sleep, such as it is. There's no leisure time in the way you'd understand it. No days off, no weekends. Every day is focused on preparing you for the arena, either by honing your skills or simply by grinding you down into obedient exhaustion. Imagine the sheer boredom mixed with anxiety. Hours stretching out between training sessions, locked in a small cell with little to do but think. Think about your past life, the one that led you here. Think about the potential future, the one that likely ends violently. Think about the man sleeping next to you. Could he be the one? This mental toll, the psychological pressure of living constantly under the shadow of imminent death, is immense. It's not just the physical hardship. It's the relentless psychological burden. Life inside the ludus was, by all accounts, harsh. But was it the worst life in Rome? It's a point of contention among experts. Compared to, say, working in a Roman mine, which had extremely high mortality rates and horrific conditions, the ludus did offer regular food, basic shelter, and importantly, dedicated medical care. More on that later, but relative to other slaves, it was better. So, while undeniably brutal, the question is debated. Were the conditions in a gladiator school uniformly worse than the absolute lowest depths of Roman slavery? Or did the potential for fame, wealth, for the owner, and even freedom, however slim, make it a different kind of terrible existence? There's no easy answer, and it likely varied significantly between different schools and different owners. You see the doctors moving among you, correcting stances with a jab of their stick, barking orders, demonstrating techniques. They are scarred, hardened men, living proof that survival is possible, but also a constant reminder of the price of failure. They show you how to hold a shield to protect your vital organs, how to thrust a sword into specific points to disable or kill, how to move your feet to stay out of reach or close the distance. It's practical, deadly instruction. They aren't teaching you for sport. They're teaching you to kill or avoid being killed. Sometimes you might see a veteran paraded out, someone famous, maybe even a champion. He'll have better gear, a more confident bearing. He's the star, the moneymaker. He represents the distant, almost mythical possibility of rising above the mass of anonymous Tyrones. His presence is both an inspiration and a demoralizing reminder of how far you have to go and how many nameless bodies lie between you and that status. The smells within the ludus become familiar. The sweat of training, the cooking barley, the dampness of stone, the pervasive metallic tang that you now recognize as the residue of blood and iron. Your body becomes accustomed to the aches, the bruises, the blisters. Your mind begins to adapt, pushing down the fear, focusing on the immediate task, the next training drill, the next meal. You learn to live in the present moment because the future is too uncertain and too terrifying to dwell on for long. This is life within the walls. This is the foundation being laid, the brutal preparation for the sand that awaits you. Living inside the ludus walls, you quickly understand that you don't just belong to the school. You belong entirely to one person, the lanista. This individual is the owner and manager of the gladiator troupe. They are the one who bought you, whether you were a prisoner, a slave, or someone who sold themselves. They invested in you, and they expect a return on that investment, and they hold absolute, unquestioned power over your life. Think of the lanista as the ultimate boss, but one whose authority extends far beyond firing you. The lanista can train you, feed you, or not, house you, decide when and where you fight, rent you out to fight in games elsewhere, sell you to another lanista as easily as selling a piece of furniture, or even have you executed for insubordination, or simply if they deem you no longer profitable or useful. There is no appeal, no higher authority you can turn to within this system. Your life is literally in their hands. This isn't just a figure of speech. The lanista has the legal right of ius vitae nisisk, the power of life and death, over the gladiators they own. This complete dominion is a terrifying reality of the gladiator's existence, a central mainstream historical fact. The lanista is driven primarily by profit. They buy, train, and sell gladiators like valuable commodities. Your skill, your potential for entertainment, your ability to survive and win fights, these are what determine your value to them. A promising novice might be worth a certain amount, but a seasoned veteran, a champion who consistently draws crowds and wins bets, is worth a fortune. This creates a strange incentive. Your owner wants you to survive and perform well, but they also constantly risk your life for their gain. It's a delicate, often ruthless, balancing act. Interaction with the lanista would likely be infrequent and intimidating. You're not their friend, you're their property. When you do see them, they might be barking orders, overseeing training, or perhaps inspecting you like livestock before a potential sale or fight. Their mood could be unpredictable. One moment focused on business, the next flying into a rage over a perceived failure or act of defiance. Some lanistas were notorious for their cruelty, others perhaps more purely calculating, but none were soft. They couldn't afford to be. Running a ludus was a tough business in a tough world. It's a quirky tidbit that despite their wealth and influence, Lannistas were generally looked down upon by Roman society. They were seen as dealing in death and associating with the lowest classes of people. Gladiators, although popular entertainers, were legally and socially considered little better than criminals. They were excluded from holding public office and were often viewed with suspicion and contempt by the upper classes, even those who avidly attended gladiator games. Imagine that. You're the owner of the star attraction, a man known throughout the empire. You make piles of money from his dangerous performances, but polite society wrinkles its nose at you. It's a fascinating contradiction in Roman culture. The Lannista is the one who makes all the key decisions about your career, such as it is. They decide what type of gladiator you will be trained as, based on your physique, your aptitude, and the needs of their troop. They negotiate the contracts with the organizers of the games, determining when and where you will fight, against whom, and for how much money, which, of course, goes to them. They decide if you're ready for the arena, if you're recovered from an injury, or if you're simply too old or too damaged to be profitable anymore. This power dynamic permeates every aspect of life in the ludus. Your trainers answer to the Lannista. The guards are employed by the Lannista. The food you eat, the gear you use, the very straw on your bed, it all comes from the Lannista's purse. You are utterly dependent on their decisions for your survival, your sustenance, and any remote hope of a different future. There's a debate among experts about whether all Lannistas operated in the same brutally cold, profit-driven manner. While the general picture is one of ruthless business owners, is it possible some might have treated their gladiators with a modicum of paternalism, perhaps seeing them as assets to be preserved rather than simply disposable tools? Most evidence suggests the former. The business was simply too cutthroat, and the product too risky for sentimentality. However, individual personalities and circumstances likely varied. It's a reminder that history isn't always a single monolithic experience. Consider the psychological impact of this relationship. You are constantly being evaluated, your worth measured in potential bloodshed and crowd appeal. Your life has a price tag, and that price tag is controlled by someone who sees you not as a person with hopes and fears, but as a piece of property that performs. This objectification, this reduction of your being to a tool for entertainment and profit, is profoundly dehumanizing. It chips away at your sense of self-worth, reinforcing the idea that your only value lies in your ability to fight and potentially die. The Lannista also controls the flow of information. You might only know about your next fight when they decide to tell you. Rumors might swirl through the ludus about upcoming games, about which gladiators are being rented out, about who is being brought in as new cannon fodder. But the definitive word comes from the Lannista. They are the gatekeeper to the outside world, the one who connects the contained violence of the ludus to the roaring amphitheaters of the empire. Imagine the mixture of fear and perhaps a twisted form of respect you might feel towards your Lannista. Fear, obviously, because they hold your life in their hands. Respect, perhaps, if they are successful, if their gladiators are famous and win, suggesting they know what they're doing, even if their methods are brutal. Their success means you might have a slightly better chance of survival, being part of a well-managed, successful troop, rather than a failing one whose gladiators are carelessly thrown away. It's a perverse bond, rooted in power and desperation. Ultimately, the Lannista is the linchpin of this entire system from your perspective. They are the ones who set the wheels in motion that brought you here, trained you, and will eventually send you into the arena. Their decisions dictate your immediate future and your likely end. You might train endlessly, hone your skills to perfection, survive multiple fights, but none of it matters without the lanista. They are the dealer of fates within the ludus, the personification of the brutal commercial reality of being a gladiator in ancient Rome. Their shadow hangs over every hour of your day, a constant reminder of your precarious position. The lanista holds the keys, but the doctors are the ones who forge you. Training in the ludus is not about building character or promoting fair play. It's about creating efficient, deadly fighters, capable of putting on a show and surviving long enough to be profitable. Your days are dominated by this relentless, often monotonous physical grind. Imagine the training yard early in the morning. The air is cool, but quickly warms as the sun rises. You're lined up with the other Tyrones, perhaps still stiff and sore from the previous day. The doctoress, usually former gladiators themselves, move among you, their scarred bodies a testament to their own survival, their voices gruff and commanding. Their teaching methods are direct, often involving blows from their sticks to correct poor form or lack of effort. There's no gentle encouragement here, only the brutal efficiency of preparing you for combat. The core of your training revolves around the palace, a sturdy wooden post driven into the ground. You spend hours working on this stationary target. You practice different strikes with a heavy wooden sword, much heavier than the real weapon you'll eventually wield. The weight is deliberate, designed to build the muscle strength and endurance needed to swing heavy metal weapons for sustained periods. You learn specific thrusts, aiming for vulnerable points like the gut, the neck, the joints. You learn how to deliver powerful blows while protecting yourself. It's repetitive, exhausting work. Strike the post, recover your stance, strike again. Hours blend into each other, the only variation being the specific type of attack or defense you're practicing. Beyond striking the palace, you drill basic movements. Footwork is critical. You learn to move around an opponent, to create distance, to close in, to pivot. You practice parrying imaginary blows with a wooden shield, the dull thud echoing in the yard. You work on stamina, running drills, perhaps carrying weights. This isn't just about looking strong. It's about being able to fight for several minutes without becoming completely winded, which could leave you vulnerable. Different types of gladiators had specialized training. If you were destined to be a retiarius, the net and trident fighter, you'd spend endless hours practicing casting the net, retrieving it, and using the trident to keep a heavily armored opponent at bay. Your training would emphasize agility and speed over brute force. If you were marked for heavier armor, like a Myrmio or Thriax, you'd focus on powerful shield techniques, coordinated attacks with a sword or curved blade, and learning how to withstand blows against your armor. This specialized training, tailored to the distinct fighting styles, is a mainstream historical fact, highlighting the complexity of gladiator combat. It wasn't just general fighting, it was a set of specific, choreographed skills. Then there's the famous gladiator diet. We mentioned the barley eaters, the hordeari. Your meals are primarily barley, boiled into a thick, almost porridge-like consistency. It's bland, heavy, and designed to put weight on you. This isn't about lean muscle mass. It's about building a layer of subcutaneous fat. Why? It's a quirky tidbit. But this layer of fat, while perhaps not making you look like a modern bodybuilder, could offer some protection against cuts. A sword slice might have to go through a layer of fat before hitting muscle or vital organs. Plus, fat stores energy for endurance. So, you're being fattened up for combat, literally. The diet also includes beans and other grains, providing necessary carbohydrates for energy during training. Meat is likely a rare luxury if provided at all, the focus being on bulk and cheap calories. And don't forget that potential ash water supplement for bone strength. Training also involved mock combat, sparring sessions where you would face fellow Tyrones, or perhaps even lower-level veterans, using blunted weapons. These sessions were still dangerous. Even blunted weapons could cause serious injury, broken bones, or severe bruising. It was your first taste of facing a moving, thinking opponent, someone actively trying to hurt you. These spars were likely overseen by the doctorees, who would stop the fight if it became too dangerous or to offer correction. The psychological aspect of training is just as significant as the physical. You are constantly being pushed beyond your limits, facing pain and exhaustion. You learn to suppress fear, or at least function despite it. You learn obedience. Failure to follow a trainer's command in the arena could cost you your life, and failure to follow it in training costs you pain and punishment. The goal is to break down your civilian self and rebuild you as a gladiator, disciplined, obedient, and effective in combat. The doctors themselves are fascinating figures. They were the survivors, the ones who had navigated the arena's dangers and emerged alive and skilled. They knew the grim realities firsthand. Their training methods were practical, focused on survival above all else. They weren't teaching fancy maneuvers that looked good, but got you killed. They taught what worked in the chaotic, brutal environment of the fight. It's debated among historians how much actual entertainment, choreography, was integrated into basic training versus how much was learned on the job or developed by individual fighters. Were they taught balletic moves, or just how to kill efficiently? The truth is probably a mix, emphasizing efficiency with enough style to please the crowd. Imagine the weariness that settles into your bones. Every muscle aches, every joint protests. You're constantly bruised, often sporting cuts or scrapes from training mishaps. Sleep offers little relief. The few hours you get before dawn are barely enough to recover. You're fed, you're housed, you're trained. Your basic needs are met, but your life is solely dedicated to becoming a better instrument of violence for your owner. There's no time for personal reflection, no energy for anything but getting through the day's grueling schedule. This relentless, physical and mental conditioning is the furnace in which gladiators were forged. You are being molded day by day into someone capable of facing the arena, someone the lanista can profit from. All that brutal training takes a toll on your body. Life as a gladiator, even within the ludus walls, is physically punishing. Injuries are not just likely, they are inevitable. Whether it's a sprained ankle from a bad fall during a drill, a deep bruise from a wooden sword, or the more serious wounds sustained during sparring, your body is constantly under assault. And when you eventually step into the arena, the injuries become potentially life-ending. How did the Romans handle this? Well, they had a system, but it was very different from modern medicine. Imagine the scene after a tough training session, or a spar gone wrong. Someone is down, perhaps clutching a twisted limb, or bleeding from a deep cut, caused by an accidental slip of a blunted blade. There's likely a medicus on staff at the ludus. This is the gladiator doctor. It's a quirky tidbit, but gladiator schools were actually known for having relatively good medical care compared to other segments of Roman society, especially for slaves. Why? Because gladiators were valuable assets. Killing one in training was bad business, and getting them back on their feet after an injury meant they could fight again and earn more money for the lanista. So, while not exactly state-of-the-art by today's standards, the medical attention you received as a gladiator might be better than what a regular Roman citizen or typical slave could expect. The medici employed in Ludi weren't always top-tier physicians, but some were quite skilled. Learning anatomy through treating wounds and possibly even dissections. Though this is debated among scholars, was it common or rare? They could set broken bones, stitch up cuts, and treat infections using herbal remedies, basic salves, and sometimes rather painful procedures. Pain relief as we know it didn't really exist, so you'd just have to grit your teeth and bear it while the medicus worked on you. Imagine the sensation of having a wound cleaned with harsh liquid, perhaps wine or vinegar, and then stitched closed with rough thread. It would be excruciating. Hygiene within the ludus was, let's say, suboptimal. You're living in close quarters with many other men. Washing facilities are basic and communal. Disease could spread quickly through the barracks. Simple infections from cuts or scrapes, if left untreated, could turn deadly. Fevers and stomach ailments were likely common occurrences, weakening you and making training even harder. While the medicus would treat specific injuries, dealing with widespread illness or maintaining sanitary conditions on a large scale was a much bigger challenge. This lack of advanced hygiene, despite the presence of doctors for injuries, created a constant low-level health risk. A mainstream historical fact, the famous Greek physician Galen, who later became a prominent figure in Roman medicine, actually began his career working as a physician in a gladiator school in Pergamon, modern-day Turkey, before moving to Rome. His experiences treating gladiator injuries provided him with invaluable knowledge of anatomy and trauma, as he was able to observe the inside of the human body through the horrific wounds sustained in combat. He describes treating all sorts of injuries, from cuts and bruises to broken bones and even collapsed lungs. This first-hand experience on gladiators significantly shaped his understanding of medicine, which would influence Western medicine for centuries. It's a strange twist of fate that the suffering of gladiators contributed so directly to medical knowledge. Despite the best efforts of the medicus, some injuries were too severe. A deep sword thrust, a crushing blow, a wound that became badly infected. These could be fatal. Recovery was a slow, painful process, and there was no guarantee of full healing. A permanent limp, a weakened limb, nerve damage. These could end your career just as surely as death in the arena. The lanista wouldn't keep paying for someone who couldn't fight. You could be sold off for other forms of labor, or simply cast aside. It's a point of contention among experts just how effective the gladiator medici truly were. Were they genuinely skilled practitioners for their time, or simply slightly more knowledgeable healers compared to folk medicine? Galen's writings suggest a degree of sophistication, but he might have worked at a particularly well-resourced school. The reality across the vast network of ludi in the empire was likely variable. Some schools might have had competent doctors, while others had little more than someone who could bandage a wound. Imagine the vulnerability you feel when injured. You're unable to train, unable to defend yourself, dependent on the care of the medicus and the tolerance of the lanista. You're not just in physical pain, you're grappling with the fear that this injury might be the beginning of the end, not just of your fighting career, but of your life. A prolonged recovery uses up the Lanista's resources without providing profit. Your value diminishes with every day you can't train or fight. Even minor, nagging injuries were a constant companion. Blisters on your hands, aching muscles, bruised feet, these were just part of the daily reality. You learned to push through pain, to ignore discomfort, because showing weakness could invite trouble, either from trainers or from other gladiators looking to assert dominance. So, while you might get your broken arm set or your gaping wound stitched, life within the Ludus walls was far from healthy. It was a constant battle against injury, infection, and illness, with the looming threat of being discarded if your body failed you too completely. The medicus could patch you up, but they couldn't erase the fundamental danger of your profession or the unsanitary conditions you lived in. Your body was your tool, and it was constantly being chipped away at, repaired, and sent back into the grinder. All the training, the harsh conditions, the absolute power of the Lanista, the injuries, it all leads to this, the arena. But before you step onto that sand, before you face an opponent determined to kill you, you have to make a vow. This isn't just signing up for a job. It's entering into a sacred, terrifying covenant. You must swear the gladiator's oath, the sacramentum gladiatorium. Imagine standing there, perhaps in the presence of your Lanista or Roman official, surrounded by your fellow gladiators, the air heavy with formality despite the grim circumstances. You lift your hand, perhaps placing it on an altar or holding a symbolic object, and then you recite the words that strip away your legal personhood and bind you completely to the will of your owner and the demands of the spectacle. You swear to accept any fate, any punishment that comes with this life. The oath is chilling in its simplicity and brutality. Uri, vincere, verberare, feroce, nicari. Let's break that down, shall we? Uri, to be burned. This likely refers to branding, marking you as the property of the Lanista, similar to how livestock were branded. It's a physical inscription of your status, a permanent scar that declares you are owned. It could also refer to punishments, like being burned with hot irons for infractions. Either way, it's not exactly a spa treatment, is it? Vincere, to be bound. This speaks to your loss of freedom. You are literally bound to the Lanista, unable to leave the Ludus or refuse to fight. It's the legal chain that shackles you to this path, more powerful than any physical restraints. You are not a free man. You are property under contract, and that contract binds you absolutely. Verberare, to be beaten. This acknowledges the physical discipline inherent in training and Ludus life. Trainers beat you, guards beat you, punishment involved beatings. You swear to accept this violence against your body as part of your condition. It's an explicit recognition that your physical being is subject to the will of others, to be struck and beaten as deemed necessary, feroc nicari, and to be killed by the sword. This is the big one, the core of the oath. You swear to accept death by the blade, the very tool of your trade. You commit yourself to the possibility, the high probability, that your life will end violently on the sand, run through by the sword of another gladiator, or dispatched by an executioner's blade if you are defeated and the crowd demands it. Uri, vincere, verberare, feroc nicari. To be burned, bound, beaten, and killed by the sword. You repeat these words, or perhaps they are spoken on your behalf as you assent. These aren't abstract concepts. They are the concrete realities of the life you are embracing, or rather, the life that has been imposed upon you and which you are now solemnly swearing allegiance to. This gladiator's oath is a mainstream historical fact, a stark and chilling record of the complete legal and personal subjugation that defined a gladiator's status in Roman society. It essentially makes you infames, stripping you of your rights as a citizen and placing you in the lowest social category, little better than a condemned criminal. This oath is often compared to the vows taken by soldiers, but it's fundamentally different. Soldiers swear allegiance to the state, to Rome. Gladiators swear allegiance to their lanista and to the demands of the spectacle. They become, in essence, legal corpses, individuals whose lives and bodies are forfeit, given over to the entertainment of the masses. This makes them, legally speaking, incredibly vulnerable and without recourse. It's a point of contention among experts. Was this oath seen purely as a legal contract, or did it carry some deeper, almost religious or ritualistic significance in the minds of those who swore it or those who administered it? The language is certainly powerful and formulaic, suggesting more than just a business agreement. Consider the psychological weight of swearing such an oath. Even if you were forced into this life, saying those words aloud, committing yourself verbally to burning, bondage, beating, and death by the sword, must have been a profoundly disturbing experience. It's the moment where you officially relinquish your former identity and step fully onto the path of the gladiator. There's no turning back after this. Your old life is formally over. Your body, your will, your very existence are now dedicated to the spectacle. It's a quirky tidbit that while this oath seems designed to remove all gladiator agency, there are instances where gladiators, particularly famous or popular ones, did seem to acquire a degree of informal power or leverage. Their popularity made them valuable, and a lanista might be hesitant to provoke a beloved champion too much. There are also instances of gladiators forming associations or collegia, which might have offered some mutual support or even acted as a form of collective bargaining, though this is highly debated and certainly not a given for every gladiator. So, while legally bound by this terrifying oath, the social reality might have been slightly more complex for the very few who achieved fame and longevity. Swearing the oath reinforces the discipline of the ludus. You are reminded daily that your life is not your own, that obedience is paramount, and that the ultimate penalty for failure is death, a death you have already sworn to accept. It's another layer of psychological conditioning, designed to make you compliant and ready to face whatever your lanista and the crowd demand. You are a tool, sharpened for a single brutal purpose, and the oath acknowledges this purpose explicitly. Imagine the feeling after the words are spoken. A sense of finality? A cold knot of fear in your stomach? Resignation? There's no applause, no celebration, just the quiet, heavy realization of the vows you've just taken. These are the terms of your existence from this moment forward. Your body, your suffering, your potential death, they are no longer yours to control. They belong to the spectacle, to the entertainment, ratified by this grim, binding oath. You are now officially a man who has sworn to be burned, bound, beaten, and killed by the sword. Welcome to the life. So you've sworn the oath. You're branded, bound, ready to be beaten, and, well, you know the rest. What does a typical day look like when you're not actively training your muscles raw or bracing for the arena? Monotony. Pure, unadulterated, soul-crushing monotony. punctuated by moments of intense physical exertion or crushing anxiety. Imagine waking up in the dim light of the Ludus cell. The same bare stone walls, the same rough mat, the same snoring companions. The air is probably cold and damp in the winter, stifling and dusty in the summer. There's no morning alarm clock, just the routine, the light filtering in, and the sounds of the Ludus slowly coming to life. Your first order of business is likely some sort of physical readiness, basic exercises, stretching stiff muscles. Then the ever-present barley porridge. Breakfast isn't a leisurely affair. It's fuel, plain and simple. You eat it quickly, fueling up for the day's demands. After breakfast, it's back to training. This is the core of your existence inside the Ludus. Hours spent in the training yard, practicing with the palace, sparring with blunted weapons, running drills, building stamina and strength. The doctors are always present, always watchful, ready to correct, punish, or push you harder. The sun beats down, the dust swirls, the sounds of grunt, strain, and weapon striking post or shield fill the air. This is your workplace, your school, and your prison gym, all rolled into one. It's physically demanding, mentally draining, and endlessly repetitive. Between training sessions, you might have periods of forced inactivity. You're confined to your cell or a small communal area. There's little to do. No books to read. You might be illiterate anyway. No games for leisure. No contact with the outside world. You're just waiting. Waiting for the next training session. Waiting for the next meal. Waiting, perhaps, for the dreaded summons to the arena. This waiting, this confinement, is a significant part of the daily grind. It leaves ample time for your mind to wander, often to dark places. You think about what led you here, about your family if you had one, about the men you've seen leave for the arena and not return. It's a quiet form of psychological torture. Meals are simple and functional. More barley, beans, perhaps some vegetables if you're lucky. It's nourishment designed for function, not pleasure. You eat quickly, maybe in silence, maybe with hushed conversations with the men around you. Talk about training, about the trainers, about rumors of upcoming games, maybe even guarded talk about who seems likely to survive and who doesn't. Hygiene, as mentioned before, is basic. Communal wash basins, cold water. Keeping clean is a constant struggle against the dust, sweat, and grime that are the constant companions of Ludus life. This lack of advanced sanitation contributed to the spread of illness, adding another layer of misery to daily existence. A mainstream historical fact about daily life. While the image of gladiators is always in the arena, the vast majority of their time was spent within the Ludus walls. Arena appearances were relatively infrequent for any single gladiator. Most days were the monotonous routine of training, eating, and waiting. The spectacle of the arena was the explosive culmination of weeks or months of this tedious preparation. Evenings are for rest, or attempting to rest. Your body aches, your mind races. Sleep might be fitful, disturbed by discomfort, noise, or nightmares. The night offers little respite from the physical and mental pressures of the day. There might be occasional variations in the routine, perhaps a visit from the lanista, a physical inspection, or the arrival of new tirones, a fresh batch of bewildered faces reminding you of your own arrival here. Or perhaps the dreaded selection process, the lanista, or a game organizer picking out fighters for an upcoming spectacle. That's a day that shatters the monotony with a jolt of pure adrenaline and fear. It's a quirky tidbit that some sources mention gladiators receiving massages as part of their care. This might have been for muscle recovery after intense training or injury. Imagine that brief moment of relative comfort. Someone working the knots out of your aching muscles. A small luxury in a life devoid of most others. It suggests that while you were property, you were valuable property, and keeping the machinery, your body in working order, was a priority. Even if the methods were rough, there's a point of contention among experts regarding the severity of discipline within the ludus. Were all ludi run like brutal military camps, or did some have a slightly less draconian approach, perhaps offering minor privileges for good performance or long service, aside from the veteran status? While stories of harsh punishment abound, it's debated whether a constant state of extreme terror was counterproductive to creating effective fighters. Perhaps a mix of severe discipline and calculated rewards was used. We lack comprehensive records for most schools to know for sure. Imagine the mental state this daily routine would induce. The lack of stimulation, the physical exhaustion, the ever-present threat of violence and death. It's a life designed to strip away individuality and instill obedience and a single-minded focus on survival in combat. There's no space for personal growth, for pursuing hobbies, for building meaningful relationships outside the strained bonds of shared misery. Your world shrinks to the walls of the ludus, the training yard, and the terrifying promise of the arena. This relentless cycle of train, eat, wait, sleep, repeat defines your existence. It's not a life. It's a prolonged period of preparation for a violent performance, a day-in, day-out grind that hollows you out while hardening your body. All right, let's talk gear. You don't just walk into the arena with whatever you were wearing when you arrived at the ludus. Gladiators fought in specific types of armor and with specific weapons, and these weren't just random choices. They were carefully selected fighting styles, each with its own advantages and disadvantages, its own visual identity, and its own grueling physical demands. Wearing all that equipment was a workout in itself, even before the fighting started. Imagine being fitted for your gear. It's not a comfortable experience. The metal is heavy, cold against your skin. The leather straps are stiff. Each piece is designed for a specific purpose. Protection for certain body parts, but leaving others deliberately exposed to make the fight more visually engaging and dangerous. This isn't full-plate armor. It's strategic protection mixed with deliberate vulnerability. Let's consider a few classic types. The murmillo, for instance. You'd wear a large, curved, rectangular shield called a scutum, similar to a Roman legionary's shield. This thing is heavy, offering great protection, but requiring significant strength to wield and tiring you out. You'd also wear a helmet with a distinctive fish crest. The word murmillo is related to fish, protecting your head and face, but restricting your vision and hearing, and likely feeling incredibly hot and stuffy. One greave on your left leg, a metal shin guard, and a protective arm guard, monica, on your right arm which wields the sword, typically a gladius, the standard Roman short sword. Try swinging a heavy scutum and a sword for several minutes, with restricted vision and breathing, in a hot, enclosed metal helmet. Exhausting, isn't it? Or consider the thrax, Thracian. You'd carry a small square or rectangular shield, the parmula, much lighter than the murmillo's scutum. This means less protection, requiring you to be more agile and reliant on your armor. You'd wear greaves on both legs and a helmet with a griffin crest. Your weapon would be a curved sword called a sika. This setup requires quick footwork and skillful use of the small shield and curved blade. A completely different physical challenge than the Murmillo's power and shield work. Then there's the Retiarius, probably the most lightly armored type. You'd fight with a large net, ori, a trident, fushina, and a dagger, pugio. Your only armor might be a shoulder guard, galeris, and an arm guard, manica. No helmet, no shield. The net is your offensive cheer defensive tool. This means you're fast, agile, with excellent visibility and breathing, but almost completely exposed. Imagine trying to entangle a moving opponent with a heavy net, maneuver a long trident, and avoid being hit, all while being practically naked, except for a bit of arm and shoulder protection. This style demanded incredible stamina and agility. It's a quirky tidbit that the Retiarius, with his lack of traditional military gear, was sometimes seen as effeminate or less manly by the Romans, compared to the heavily armored fighters who resembled legionaries. Yet it was a highly skilled and dangerous style. All this gear added significant weight. Helmets alone could be several pounds of bronze or iron. Shields were heavy. Greaves and arm guards were solid metal. Wearing this equipment, often under the hot sun, for the duration of a fight that could last several minutes, or longer if both fighters were cautious, was incredibly physically demanding. You weren't just fighting an opponent. You were fighting the weight and heat of your own equipment, a constant drain on your stamina. This specialized equipment for different gladiator types is a mainstream historical fact. The Romans formalized these classes of gladiators, each with their standard kit, creating visually distinct pairings for combat, e.g., a Murmillo often fought a Thrax or a Retiarius. This wasn't just about tactics. It was about creating interesting visual contrasts and rivalries for the audience. There's a point of contention among experts about how standardized this equipment truly was. While we have clear descriptions of typical gladiator types and illustrations showing their gear, were the weights and designs uniform across the empire and throughout the centuries? Or were there variations depending on the ludus, the lanista, or the specific materials available? It's likely there was some variation, but the core types and their general panoply remained remarkably consistent, suggesting a strong tradition or regulatory practice. Imagine the feel of the gear, the chafing of straps against your skin, the heat radiating from the metal under the sun, the limited visibility through the helmet's eye slits, the way the weight pulls on your shoulders and arms. You have to learn not just how to fight with the equipment, but how to move despite it. Your training is heavily focused on mastering your specific set of tools and armor, making them an extension of your body, compensating for their limitations. Even the most basic piece of equipment, like a loincloth, subligaculum, and a wide belt, balteus, added to the layers. On top of that went the manica, greaves, helmet, shield, and weapon. It's a lot to carry and fight in. The noise inside the helmet must have been disorienting. Your own breathing amplified, the sounds of the crowd muffled, the clatter of your opponent's gear distorted. This heavy specialized equipment wasn't just for show. It was a critical element of the fight, defining tactics and demanding specific physical attributes. Your body had to be trained to handle the weight and bulk, to develop the specific muscle groups needed for your chosen fighting style. A Retiarius needed speed and agility, while a Murmillo needed brute strength and endurance. The equipment dictated the physical requirement as much as the fighting technique. Your training included wearing and moving in this gear, getting accustomed to its limitations, and learning to leverage its strengths, all while battling its inherent physical cost. The day arrives. It might be announced well in advance, giving you weeks to dread it, or it might be sprung on you with little warning. Either way, the atmosphere in the ludus changes. There's a different kind of tension in the air, a mix of anticipation, fear, and perhaps a strange sort of exhilaration among a few veterans. It's game day. Today you might step onto the sand. Imagine the morning of the games. There's no training today, at least not the usual kind. You're given a better meal than usual. Maybe some meat, a bit of wine. The lanista wants you strong and ready. You're cleaned up as much as possible, your body oiled, your hair perhaps styled according to your gladiator type. Some wore their hair short, others long, depending on the style and tradition. It's a preparation, a transformation from the grubby trainee to the potential star of the spectacle. Then comes the assembly. You gather with your fellow gladiators chosen for today's combats. You might see men from different schools, brought in by their lanistas for the games. The air is thick with nerves. You're probably quiet, focusing inward, or perhaps engaging in forced bravado with the men around you. And then, the procession, the pampa. This is the grand opening ceremony of the games, a spectacle in itself before the bloodshed even begins. Imagine lining up with all the participants, the lanista and his retinue, the musicians playing trumpets and horns, men carrying signs announcing the combats and the names of the gladiators, attendants carrying the weapons and armor that will be used, perhaps even men leading the animals that will feature in the morning hunts. And you, the gladiators, in your most impressive, perhaps even ceremonial gear, you march through the city streets, heading towards the amphitheater. The route would be lined with crowds. This is your first exposure to the public, the people whose entertainment you exist to provide. Imagine the noise, the shouts, the cheers, the whistles, the jeers. They are assessing you, judging your physique, your bearing, looking for their favorites. Some might be placing bets on you. You are on display, a living exhibit in a procession celebrating the power and generosity of the game's sponsor. This public procession, the Pampa, is a mainstream historical fact. It was a crucial part of the games, building excitement and introducing the participants to the audience. It wasn't just a practical movement from point A to point B. It was a theatrical performance designed to hype up the crowd and elevate the status of the games and their patron. Walking in the Pampa, you might feel a bizarre mix of emotions. Fear, certainly. You know where you're heading and what awaits you. But perhaps also a flicker of pride? For a brief moment, you are seen. You are the focus of thousands of eyes. You have a name announced, a type recognized. After the anonymity of the ludus, this public acknowledgement, however fleeting and tied to your likely death, might offer a strange sense of significance. Or perhaps you feel nothing but dread. Your face, a mask of forced stoicism. It's a quirky tidbit that while most gladiators were slaves or condemned men, there were occasional instances of freeborn Romans, even members of the equestrian or senatorial classes, who voluntarily chose to fight as gladiators, though this was often seen as scandalous and efforts were made to curb it. Imagine one of these social elites marching alongside you in the Pampa, perhaps with a look of misguided adventure or sheer desperation on his face. a stark contrast to the resigned fear in the eyes of most of your companions. They swore the same grim oath, remember? The music of the procession is loud, possibly intended to drown out the nerves and build atmosphere. The scent of incense might mix with the smells of the city and the unwashed crowds. You can feel the vibrations of the marching feet, the sheer weight of the assembled mass moving towards the arena. As you approach the amphitheater, the noise of the crowd intensifies. You can hear the roar of the spectators already inside, a distant, powerful sound that grows louder with every step. The sheer scale of the structure looms before you. A massive stone bowl capable of holding tens of thousands of people. This is the engine of the spectacle. The place where lives are staked and fortunes are won and lost. There's a point of contention among experts about the exact route and duration of the Pampa. Did it always go through the main streets? Was it a brief march or a lengthy parade? While there are descriptions, the specifics likely varied depending on the city, the size of the games, and the patron. But the core element, the public display of participants before the event, was a consistent feature. You march, you don't walk. You maintain formation, your body moving automatically, one foot in front of the other. You try not to meet the eyes of the spectators, but you can feel their gaze upon you. This is their show, and you are the main act, albeit an unwilling one for many. The Pampa is the curtain raiser, the moment where the energy of the city is channeled towards the arena, creating a potent, almost electric atmosphere that you are now inescapably a part of. You pass through the gates, leaving the streets behind, and enter the bowels of the massive structure, the noise of the crowd engulfing you as you prepare for what comes next. You've marched in the Pampa, felt the eyes of the city upon you, heard the rising roar of the crowd. Now you are beneath the amphitheater, in the tunnels and holding pens, the air thick with the smell of animals, sweat, and anticipation. This is the belly of the beast, the place where you wait for your moment to enter the spotlight. Imagine the sensory overload as you get closer to the arena floor. The noise is deafening. The combined voices of tens of thousands of spectators in a stone bowl is an incredible force of sound, a constant, undulating roar that vibrates through the very stone walls. It's not distinct voices. It's a single, overwhelming entity of noise, cheering, shouting, stamping feet. You can feel it in your chest. The air is heavy, hot from the sun beating down on the open arena, dusty from the sand, carrying the scent of animals from the venaciones, animal hunts that might have happened earlier, and the pervasive, metallic smell of blood, both fresh and dried from previous events. It's a potent, visceral mix. Then the call comes. Your name, or your gladiator type, is announced. This is it. There's no more waiting, no more training, no more thinking about the past or the future. There is only the present moment and the terrifying prospect of stepping out into that roaring bowl. You walk down a tunnel, perhaps with a handler or guard beside you. The light at the end of the tunnel is blindingly bright after the gloom of the passages. And as you emerge, the full force of the spectacle hits you. You are on the arena floor, the soft, blood-soaked sand under your feet. The sky is a vast, blue dome above the rim of the amphitheater. And around you, rising up in a steep, impossible incline, are the stands, packed with people. So many people. Faces blurring into a single expectant mass, stretching up towards the sky. The roar of the crowd surges, a wall of sound washing over you. They are cheering. They are yelling. They are waiting for you. This moment of entering the arena the sudden transition from the quiet confines below to the overwhelming public space is incredibly jarring. The sheer scale of the amphitheater, whether it's the massive Colosseum in Rome or a smaller arena in a provincial town, is designed to impress and to contain the spectacle. You are at the very center of it, tiny against the backdrop of stone and humanity. You stand with your opponent, maybe one or two other pairs, depending on the format of the combat. You might salute the editor, the sponsor of the games, often with the famous, though perhaps not always historically used, phrase, Ave Caesar. Morituri te salutant. Hail Caesar. Those who are about to die salute you. Even if the words weren't always spoken, the sentiment was clear. You are here to face death for their entertainment. This gesture, acknowledging the power of the game's sponsor, is a key part of the ritual of the arena. As you stand there, the doctors might be giving you last-minute instructions, the lanista watching from a box, perhaps with a mixture of pride and calculation on his face. The tension is almost unbearable. You are hyper-aware of everything. The weight of your gear, the feel of the sand beneath your feet, the heat of the sun, the deafening roar of the crowd, the presence of the man standing opposite you, the man you must now try to kill, a mainstream historical fact about entering the arena. The gladiators often made a circuit of the arena floor upon entering, allowing the crowd to see them, assess them, and build anticipation. This wasn't just walking to your starting point. It was part of the pre-fight spectacle, another moment of being on display. It's a quirky tidbit, but sometimes animals were released into the arena before the gladiatorial combats, either for hunts, venation, or as part of the morning's program, matutina. So, you might be standing there waiting for your fight, on sand that was recently churned up by bulls or stained with the blood of exotic beasts. Just another layer of the bizarre reality you inhabit. There's a point of contention among experts about the emotional state of gladiators at this moment. Were they consumed by fear? Did they achieve a state of focused calm, almost a warrior's trance? Or did it vary wildly depending on the individual, their experience level, and their chances of survival? While instinct tells us pure terror must have been dominant, the need to perform, to fight effectively, suggests some must have found a way to manage that fear, at least momentarily. The starting signal is given, perhaps a trumpet blast. The crowd noise might briefly subside, or perhaps it reaches a fever pitch, and then it begins. You raise your shield, ready your weapon, and face your opponent. You are no longer a trainee, a slave, or a condemned man. For the next few minutes, you are a gladiator, fighting for your life on the world's most brutal stage, with the eyes of Rome fixed upon you. The cold fear is still there, but now it's mixed with the primal instinct for survival. The training kicks in, the hours on the palace, the sparring, the discipline. You move forward or brace for your opponent's first move. You have stepped onto the sand and the fight has begun. The trumpet blasts, or perhaps the water organ signals the start. The noise of the crowd might surge or momentarily drop to a terrifying hush. You raise your shield, grip your weapon, and the world narrows to the patch of sand before you and the figure standing opposite. This is it. The brutal dance of combat begins. Imagine the surge of adrenaline hitting you. It's overwhelming, a physical jolt that sharpens your senses while simultaneously threatening to make your hands shake. The hours of training kick in, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought might fail. Your body moves, adopting the stance your doctors drilled into you relentlessly. You are acutely aware of the weight of your gear, the feel of the sand shifting under your feet, the distance between you and your opponent. Your opponent is just as real, just as scared, just as trained as you are. They are armed with a different set of weapons and armor, requiring you to instantly recall these specific techniques, learn to counter their style. If they're a Murmillo with a big shield, you know you need to try and get around it, find an opening. If they're a speedy Retiarius, you have to avoid the net and close the distance to use your sword effectively. It's a deadly puzzle, and the stakes are everything. The fight is not a Hollywood movie. It's fast, chaotic, and brutal. It's about finding weaknesses, exploiting openings, delivering decisive blows while avoiding receiving them yourself. You thrust, you parry, you block. The clang of metal on metal rings out, sharp and jarring above the crowd's roar. The physical exertion is immense. The weight of the weapons, the constant movement, the strain of blocking powerful blows. Sweat streams down your face, stinging your eyes. Your lungs burn. You might aim for exposed limbs, trying to disable your opponent without immediately killing them. A cut to the leg can slow a speedy fighter. A blow to the arm can make them drop their shield or weapon. But ultimately, the goal is to incapacitate or kill. This isn't about points or rounds. It's about survival through victory. The noise from the crowd is a constant, overwhelming presence. They are shouting, cheering, groaning, urging you on, or expressing disappointment. You try to block it out, to focus solely on the fight, but it's impossible to completely ignore. Their energy, their bloodlust, feeds into the intensity of the moment. They react to every successful block, every telling blow, every stumble. You are performing for them whether you want to be or not. It's a mainstream historical fact that gladiatorial combat, while deadly, also involved a degree of skill and strategy. It wasn't simply two untrained men hacking at each other. The different gladiator types, each with their specialized equipment and fighting styles, created tactical matchups that the audience understood and appreciated. They were watching a deadly martial art, honed through rigorous training. Imagine the feeling of your weapon connecting with your opponent's shield or armor, the shock that travels up your arm, the scrape of metal, or worse, the sickening thud as it connects with flesh. You might feel pain yourself, a glancing blow that slices your skin, the impact of a shield against your body, the sting of a trident tip that finds its mark. You have to fight through the pain, ignore the blood if you're bleeding, and keep your focus. A quirky tidbit: the Romans sometimes used musical accompaniment during the fights. Flute players, trumpeters, and water organ players would provide music, potentially to set the pace or mood of the combat. Imagine the bizarre juxtaposition of this beautiful, organized music accompanying the raw, chaotic violence playing out on the sand before you. It adds another strange layer to the spectacle, a veneer of artistry over the brutality. The fight could be over quickly, a decisive blow, a lucky thrust. Or it could be a prolonged, exhausting struggle, both fighters wearing each other down, looking for any sign of weakness. Your stamina is key here. Remember all that running and weight training back in the Ludus? This is what it was for. The fighter who tires first is often the one who loses. There's a point of contention among experts. How much did gladiators pull their punches or try to prolong the fight for entertainment? While some sources suggest a desire for a good show, others emphasize the deadly nature of the combat and the high mortality rates. Was it a genuine fight to the death every time? Or did fighters sometimes cooperate, subtly perhaps, if both were valuable and the crowd wasn't demanding immediate blood. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, varying depending on the individuals, the Lannistas, and the specific games. But the fundamental reality was that you were expected to fight to kill, and your opponent was trying to kill you. As the fight wears on, the initial adrenaline might give way to pure, desperate exhaustion. Your muscles scream, your breath comes in ragged gasps. You are running on instinct and the sheer will to survive. The sand is churned up, maybe stained with blood. The roar of the crowd is a distant hum in your ears, replaced by the sound of your own ragged breathing and the clash of weapons. This isn't glorious combat. It's a desperate, brutal struggle for survival, played out under the unforgiving glare of the Roman sun, with thousands of eyes watching your every move, waiting for the moment when one of you falls. The fight is over, or perhaps paused. One of you is down. Maybe it's you, wounded and unable to continue. Or maybe it's your opponent, disarmed, injured, or simply yielding. The fight stops, but the tension doesn't break. Now your fate rests in the hands of thousands, and ultimately, in the hand of one person, the editor, the man who paid for these games. Imagine lying there on the sand, or kneeling, perhaps dropping your weapon as a sign of submission. Your body is screaming, likely in pain, definitely from exhaustion. Your heart is pounding, not just from the fight, but from sheer, overwhelming fear. You've done your part. You've fought. Now it's up to them. The crowd is roaring. This is where their power, their collective will comes into play. They haven't just watched the fight. They've judged it. Did you fight bravely? Did you put on a good show? Did you look like you deserved to live? Or did you fight poorly, perhaps even cowardly? Their opinion is expressed through noise and gesture, a mainstream historical fact. The ultimate decision on the fate of a defeated gladiator belonged to the editor of the games. He was the one who had the final say. However, the crowd's will was a significant factor. They would signal their desire most famously with their thumbs. Now, about the thumbs. You've probably seen the image. Thumb up for mercy, thumb down for death. It's a classic movie trope. But it's a quirky tidbit that historians aren't entirely sure which way the thumb pointed for which outcome, or even if it was a thumb at all. Some evidence suggests police verso, turned thumb, meant death, but the exact gesture, thumb up, down, to the side, is debated. Another interpretation is that a thumbs up, meaning a closed fist, with thumb extended upwards, like a modern hitchhiker's thumb, might have represented a drawn sword and meant death, while a closed fist, or covered thumb, signaled mercy, sheathing the sword. Whatever the gesture, the intent was clear, and the crowd understood how to signal their wish to the editor. Imagine looking up from the sand at that vast, undulating sea of faces. You can see the movement of hands, the forest of thumbs, or whatever gesture they used, pointing this way and that. You can't hear individual voices anymore, just the deafening, unified roar of their judgment. They are debating your life, deciding if you're worth saving, or if you should be dispatched. It's the most terrifying popularity contest you could ever be a part of. The editor sits in his box, usually in a prominent position, looking out at the arena and the crowd. He watches the fight. He sees the crowd's reaction, and then he makes his decision. He might follow the crowd's will because it's politically expedient. It pleases the people he wants to impress. Or he might go against them, Perhaps if the defeated gladiator is particularly valuable to his lanista, or if the fighter showed exceptional courage and the editor wants to display his own magnanimity. This act of the editor deciding, often swayed by the crowd, is a critical moment in the gladiator's story. If the crowd signals mercy and the editor agrees, you are spared. You might be helped from the arena, taken to the medical staff to be treated. It's a reprieve, a chance to fight another day. You survived this one. The wave of relief must be immense, washing over the pain and fear. But if the crowd signals death and the editor confirms it, your fate is sealed. The victorious gladiator might be expected to deliver the final blow, or an executioner, sometimes dressed in a costume, more on that in a moment, might enter the arena to dispatch you. This is where your sworn oath, Farok Nakari, comes to pass. You accepted this possibility when you swore that vow. There's a point of contention among experts. How often was mercy actually granted? Were the games always bloodbaths? Or did skilled fighters who put on a good show have a reasonable chance of survival? While death was a constant threat, the expense of training a gladiator, especially a skilled one, might incentivize lanistas and editors to grant mercy to valuable fighters, preserving them for future games. It wasn't always a kill or be killed scenario, but the possibility of death was always very, very real, and depended heavily on the unpredictable whims of the crowd and the editor. Imagine the victorious gladiator standing over you, awaiting the signal, or the executioner approaching. There's no escape, nowhere to run. You have fought as bravely as you could, perhaps, or perhaps not. But now your body is broken or unable to continue, and the decision is out of your hands. You are at the mercy of the spectacle and the people who consume it. The power of the crowd, their ability to literally vote on your life or death, is a terrifying and unique aspect of being a gladiator. Their roar is your judge and jury, and their thumbs are the final arbiter of your existence in the arena. So the dice rolled, and they didn't land in your favor. The crowd demanded blood, the editor gave the signal. Imagine that final moment. The victorious gladiator or an attendant approaches. There's nowhere to run, no way to fight back. You have yielded, and your life is now forfeit according to the brutal rules of the arena. The final blow is delivered. It might be a sword thrust to the neck or chest, a quick, brutal end. It's swift, final, and utterly devoid of ceremony from your perspective. One moment you are a living, breathing being, albeit defeated, and the next, nothing. The sand which you trained on, fought on, and bled on becomes your final resting place. But the spectacle isn't quite over from the crowd's point of view. The disposal of the body is part of the grim ritual. Imagine the attendants entering the arena floor. Sometimes, they were dressed in symbolic costumes. A quirky tidbit here. One figure was often dressed as Mercury, the messenger of the gods, who would symbolically test if the gladiator was truly dead by touching them with a hot iron. Another figure might be dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, complete with a mask and a mallet. This Charon figure would oversee the removal of the body, perhaps even giving it a final, unnecessary blow with the mallet. These figures, Mercury and Charon, represent the transition from the world of the living to the underworld. Their presence adds a layer of dark, theatrical symbolism to the grim task of clearing the arena floor for the next combat. Imagine seeing these masked figures approach your fallen form, confirming your death and preparing to haul you away. It's a final, macabre act in the arena's deadly drama. Your body would be dragged from the arena through a gate, often called the Porta Libitinensis, named after Libitina, the Roman goddess of death and funerals. This gate was specifically for the dead, a one-way exit from the arena floor. Imagine being unceremoniously dragged through that gate, leaving behind the roaring crowd and the blood-soaked sand. Your brief moment in the spotlight brutally extinguished. What happened to the bodies then? Well, they were property. A mainstream historical fact is that the bodies of executed criminals and gladiators were often disposed of in common burial pits or simply left outside the city walls. For gladiators owned by a lanista, their body might be returned to the ludus. Their equipment, which was valuable, would certainly be retrieved. The body itself, however, had little value once the life was gone. They might be buried in a gladiator cemetery if the school had one, like the well-known cemetery found in Ephesus, which has provided archaeologists with much information about gladiator health, diet, and injuries. These burials, often marked with simple stones mentioning the gladiator's name, origin, and number of fights, provide a rare glimpse into their lives and deaths beyond the literary sources. If you were a condemned criminal forced into the arena, your death was your punishment, your body simply a final, gruesome part of the public spectacle. There were no honors, no mourning rituals. You died as you lived in that moment, as a disposable commodity for the entertainment of the masses. Even if you weren't killed outright in the arena, but died later from your wounds back in the ludus, the outcome was the same. Your life as a gladiator was over, ending not in glory or freedom, but in pain and death. The same procedures, the same lack of ceremony that a free Roman citizen might expect in death, would likely apply. There's a point of contention among experts about the level of respect accorded to gladiator remains. While some might end up in common pits, the existence of dedicated gladiator cemeteries suggests that in some cases, at least by their fellow gladiators, or perhaps a more respectful lanista, they were given a minimal burial rite. Was this common practice, or limited to certain schools or famous fighters? The evidence is mixed, but the idea that even the despised gladiator might receive some semblance of final dignity, however humble, is debated. Imagine the scene back in the ludus after the games. Some men return, battered and wounded, but alive. Others don't. Their cells are empty. Their gear is cleaned and stored, ready for the next occupant or the next round of training. There might be a somber mood, a quiet acknowledgement of the fallen. But life goes on. The survivors must train, eat, and prepare for their own turn on the sand. Death in the arena is a constant possibility, and when it happens to someone you knew, someone you trained beside, it's a stark, brutal reminder of your own precarious existence. You mourn briefly, perhaps, but then you focus on your own survival. There's no time for prolonged grief when your own life is on the line in the next games. The death of a gladiator, while tragic on a personal level, was simply part of the cost of doing business in the Roman entertainment industry. Let's imagine for a moment you beat the odds. You survived not just one fight, but several. You became a veteran, maybe even famous. Your name is known in the city. People cheer for you. You might even have fan graffiti scrawled on walls. Does this mean you've escaped the grim reality of being a gladiator? Not entirely. Even if you survived, you were marked. You lived under the shadow of infamia. What is infamia? It's a legal and social status in Roman society that basically means disgrace or dishonor. It carried severe legal disabilities. As a gladiator, you were automatically infames. This is a mainstream historical fact. You were grouped with other socially undesirable professions and statuses. Actors, yes, even famous ones, prostitutes, pimps, and those convicted of certain crimes. Being infamous meant you lost many of the rights and privileges of a full Roman citizen. You couldn't vote, you couldn't hold public office, which wasn't likely on your career path anyway, but still. You couldn't serve in the military, ironic, given your fighting skills, and your ability to participate in legal proceedings was severely limited. Your testimony might be less credible. You might not be able to bring certain cases before a court, and you were more vulnerable to certain punishments. In the eyes of the law, you were a person of diminished status, legally disgraced. Imagine this paradox. You are a public hero, a champion cheered by emperors and senators. Your image appears on lamps and mosaics. People bet fortunes on you, and yet, legally, you are less than a freeborn beggar. You might walk the streets outside the ludus after a victory, basking in the fleeting admiration. But you know that underneath the cheers, you are still seen as inherently dishonorable by polite society. You are needed for the spectacle, but despised for your profession. It's a bizarre form of celebrity, isn't it? Famous, yes, but also fundamentally tainted. This status of infamia stuck with you. Even if you were eventually freed, a rare possibility we'll touch on, the mark of having been a gladiator, having sworn that terrible oath and performed violence for public entertainment, often remained. You might be free, but you were still the former gladiator, forever associated with the arena and the low social standing it represented. A quirky tidbit about infamia and gladiators. Despite their disgraced legal status, some famous gladiators were incredibly popular, bordering on idolized. They had fan followings. Women were sometimes infatuated with them, and as mentioned, their images appeared on various items. This shows a fascinating disconnect between legal status and popular opinion. The public loved the spectacle and the star performers, even while society's legal framework viewed them as fundamentally dishonorable. It's like being the world's most popular reality TV star, but legally being treated like a convicted felon. Living with infamia meant navigating a social world where many doors were closed to you. You couldn't marry into respectable families. Your children, if you had any, might inherit some of your social stigma, and certain professions or social circles would be off limits. Your interactions would likely be limited to other people of low social status, fellow gladiators, actors, freedmen, former slaves, and others on the fringes of Roman society. There's a point of contention among experts. How strictly was infamia enforced in practice, especially for wealthy or famous former gladiators? Did money and fame sometimes override the legal stigma, allowing a successful freed gladiator to gain a degree of social acceptance, if not full legal equality? Or was the mark of infamia indelible, a permanent barrier to true integration into respectable Roman society? It likely varied regionally and individually, but the legal framework was clear. You were marked. Imagine trying to build a life after the arena, even if you gained freedom. You have skills, certainly, fighting, discipline, physical conditioning, but these aren't exactly transferable to most respectable civilian jobs. You might become a doctor in a ludus, as many did, continuing your association with the arena. You might work as a bodyguard or enforcer, but establishing yourself as a respectable businessman or landowner would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, with the stain of infamia attached to your name. So, while surviving the arena was a monumental achievement, it wasn't necessarily an escape into a normal life. You carried the arena with you, etched into your legal status and your social identity. You might be a living legend, but you were also infamies, a constant reminder that in the eyes of Roman law and much of its society, you were little more than a surviving instrument of violent entertainment, forever separated from the ranks of honorable citizens. The ultimate dream for many gladiators, perhaps the only light at the end of the brutal tunnel, was freedom. Gaining your manumissio, your freedom, was incredibly rare, but it was possible. It was the elusive prize that kept some going, the slim hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't your inevitable end. How could you gain freedom? The most common way was by being awarded the rudis. This was a wooden sword, given to a gladiator who had served their time, typically around 5 years, though this wasn't a strict rule and varied greatly, and or had shown exceptional skill and courage in the arena. Awarding the rudis was usually done publicly, often by the editor of the games, signifying that you were no longer obligated to fight as a gladiator. This wooden sword was your ticket out, a symbol of your earned retirement and freedom. This act of awarding the rudis as a sign of freedom is a mainstream historical fact. Imagine the moment. You've survived fight after fight, endured the training, the confinement, the fear, and then, after a particularly good performance perhaps, or after completing your service, the editor gestures to you. An attendant brings forward a simple wooden sword. The crowd roars its approval. They appreciate a veteran. They appreciate someone beating the odds. The editor presents you with the rudis. It feels light in your hand compared to the heavy metal you're used to. It's not a weapon anymore. It's a key. You are free. Relief, disbelief, exhaustion, perhaps even a tear stinging your eye. It must be an overwhelming mix of emotions. Winning the rudis didn't necessarily mean you left the gladiator world entirely. Some rudari, those who had earned their rudis, stayed on in the ludus as trainers, doctores, passing on their knowledge and experience to the next generation. This provided them with a livelihood and a familiar environment, even if it meant remaining close to the life they had escaped. Others might leave the ludus and try to integrate into civilian life, although, as we discussed, the stain of infamia made this difficult. Another path to freedom, though far more dangerous and often less successful, was rebellion or escape. The most famous gladiator rebellion, of course, was led by Spartacus starting in 73 BC. A quirky tidbit: Spartacus himself was likely a Thrax gladiator from a ludus in Capua. His revolt grew into a massive slave army that challenged Rome for years. A terrifying prospect for the Romans who relied so heavily on their enslaved population. While Spartacus and his followers achieved a temporary, brutal freedom, their rebellion was eventually crushed with horrific casualties among the rebels. This famous, albeit ultimately failed rebellion, shows that the desire for freedom was powerful enough to drive men to desperate violent acts against their masters and the Roman state. Escape attempts from ludi also occurred, though they were difficult, given the secure nature of the schools, and the severe punishment if caught, usually death. Imagine the planning, the risk involved, the sheer desperation required to attempt to break out of those stone walls and disappear into a world that might not want you anyway. There's a point of contention among experts about how common manumission truly was for gladiators. Was it a genuine possibility for a significant number of fighters who survived long enough? Or was it an exceptionally rare reward, held out as an incentive but rarely granted in practice? While inscriptions and historical accounts confirm it happened, the overall survival rates for gladiators suggest that most died long before they ever had a chance to earn their rudies. It was a dream, a possibility, but for the vast majority, it remained just that, a dream. Imagine the challenges of freedom, even if you attained it. You are free, but you might be scarred, both physically and mentally. You carry the social stigma of infamia. You might have little money or resources, unless your lanista was unusually generous upon your release. Unlikely. You have to learn to live a civilian life after years, perhaps decades, of total dependence and brutal routine. The skills you mastered, killing and surviving in combat, are not generally applicable or desirable in polite society. It's a freedom won at immense cost, and one that didn't necessarily guarantee happiness or easy integration. So the dream of the Rudis was real, a beacon of hope in the darkness of the ludus. But for most gladiators, the reality was a much shorter, more brutal career ending on the sand. The few who did attain freedom had paid a price almost beyond measure, and the scars, both visible and invisible, would likely remain for the rest of their lives. As the echoes of the arena fade and the dust of the training yard settles, your journey with the gladiator comes to a close. You've walked in their footsteps, felt the weight of their chains, tasted their meager food, and heard the roar of the crowd pass judgment. Theirs was a life lived on the edge of a blade, a testament to the complex, often brutal nature of the ancient world's hunger for spectacle. They were heroes and outcasts, valuable property and disposable lives all at once. Their struggles, their fleeting moments of glory, and their all too common tragic ends are etched into the history of Rome. Now, let the images of the arena, the ludus, and the weary fighters drift away. Your own world is quiet, safe, and ready for rest. The sounds of trumpets and shouting thousands are gone, replaced by the gentle hum of your fan, the soft silence of your room. There are no more battles to fight tonight, no more crowds to please, no more chains to bind you. Just peace and stillness, allowing your body to relax, your mind to quiet, drifting slowly, peacefully into sleep.